On the 12th day of NESmas, NESmaker gave to me. Oh, we're going to look at a whole bunch of other stuff today. I realized today's the last day. Oh, single tear. Today's the last day of NESmas. However, don't let this be the end of your journey. I hope it's just the beginning of your journey, and I hope those of you who have been watching this series and were on the fence and wanted to know, is this something I want to do? Are ready to take the plunge? Don't forget, you can get a couple of things on our website. One, you can actually get NESmaker. You can just download the software. You can get an activation code, get ready to get started, make your game. We want to see what you can create. Get the physical copy, which also gives you a copy of the new 8-Bit Heroes, our documentary about the homebrew scene and all that cool stuff. So you can get that there as well. And you can get our first game, Mystic Origins. Nice CIB copy for yourself with a manual. You can definitely get that as well. Support the cause if you're really into this kind of thing. We'd love to have you get started creating your game and seeing what you can come up with, and supporting what we're doing would be awesome. So without further ado, let's just look at a bunch of random stuff that is unrelated, and we're going to focus really on the screen info on some of these weird bits and flags and bytes, and what do they do? What I don't, especially for somebody who's uninitiated, who doesn't, who's never used software like NESmaker, who doesn't know anything about assembly code. What do these things do? I can see by default, it's kind of weird, I have screen flags for this screen, and they say hide sprites and hide HUD. Well, if I click on them, I know I have a good feeling what they're going to do. Like if I on this screen click. Let me actually go to the start screen here. If I go to my overworld, I go to my start screen, I go to screen info, and I hide sprites, and I hide my HUD, and I hit OK. And now I test my game. I have a pretty good idea of what's going to happen. My sprite and my HUDs won't show. My HUDs and my sprites won't show. And that's what happened. And honestly, that's probably what you want to do for a start screen, right? You don't want to see your game sprites. If you want to draw sprites, you want to draw them manually to embellish the graphics on the screen. You don't want your objects running around the screen. And you usually don't see a HUD on a start screen. And sometimes you do, but not often. So we know what they do. But here's the thing that's really important to understand. These two checkboxes don't necessarily do those things. It's not that all games use these as a hide sprites and hide HUD toggles. Every game might be very different in its use, and you can make these do very different things. And it goes back to the same idea that we were dealing with when we were talking about tiles, right? What we have is we have project labels, and in the project labels, we have things like your screen flags, and your screen bytes. And right now you can see that the first one is called hide sprites and hide HUD, but I could easily change the name of that and call it something else. Now, something else, if I look at my screen info, is checked, and something else still right now hides my sprites because I didn't change what it does. I just changed what the label is, what the label in the tool says. So it's still going to hide my sprites if that's selected, right? I didn't actually change it functionally. It's exactly the same as tiles. So I'm going to go ahead and rename that back to hide sprites. But again, that's not necessarily what it does. So what we want to do is we want to pull up a piece of code that is, calling those bits right there, and see how we can manipulate that and how we can make it do things that we want it to do. So in this case, we're dealing with a special script define that is right here, and it's called extra screen load. Now this isn't the only place that you can use those bits, those toggle bits right there. But let's just take a look at this extra screen load, which is loading by default extra screen load data maze base. Hit edit. Let's take a look at what it does. It's looking at screen flags. Now, there are some of these screen flags that work properly and some that work in reverse throughout the project. So I want to give you that disclaimer right now. Things don't seem to work. I'm going to show you what else to check. But how this works is these are my screen flags right here. Screen flags 00. There's also screen flags 01. I know it's confusing because it says nothing and then 2, but this is 0 and 1. Screen flag 00 it's looking at the first toggle right here, and it's checking the second toggle right here. So it's saying, okay, look, if I look at the screen flags value and the first toggle is happening, if it's equal to 0, if this here is equal to 0, which means it's not toggled, it's rendering a 0. If it's equal to 0, don't turn off sprites here, in which case instead it's going to show the sprites. All right. If it is set to 1, then it's going to, that means it's not equal to 0. It's going to hide the sprites and then skip to here. And so what does hide sprites and show sprites do? Well, that takes a little bit of jumping down the rabbit hole here, but for the sake of this is the last day, let's check it out. If I go to my defined scripts, I can look at my macro. I can see I've got hide sprites and show sprites. So let's look at hide sprites. And if I look at my macro, all it does is it sets a specific variable called game handler. It sets a specific bit in game handler to a 1 or a 0. Why does that matter? Now, if I look at my script settings, draw sprites, handle drawing sprites, this is where it checks to see game handler. Check it out. I'm going to look at my game handler. If that bit is equal to 0, go ahead and draw it. If it's equal to 1, if it's flipped, don't draw that sprite. Jump past drawing that sprite, which is why in this case it skips drawing that sprite. So it's a bunch of interweaved pieces of code working together in tandem with various variables to cause this effect. Okay, so that might be a little bit thick. That might be a little bit confusing. But let's try adding another one of these just for kicks. So before this done with extra check, let's try this. I'm going to load screen flags 0, 0. I'm going to check this last bit right here. So I'm going to say and 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 1. There's 8 bits, 1 byte, right? Okay. If it's equal to 0, we'll pull the plus sign and put skip me. And I'm just going to put that down there so I don't forget to put it at the end. Okay, so this is what happens if that's flipped to 1. If it was flipped to 0, it's going to jump to skip me. If it's equal to 1, I'm going to just reset the game. I'm going to save this. So now, what I've done is I created, if I go to my project settings, and I go to my screen flags, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. For this screen flag, I call this an instant reset. Let me close it. Now if I go to one of my screens, let's go to screen number 2. I'm going to go into my screen info and I'm going to click my instant reset toggle. So we have determined what that means. We know that when we load the screen, this is what's going to be loaded at the end of that screen load. And the last thing it's going to check is it's going to check that last bit. And if that last bit is flipped, it's going to reset the game. Now it's only going to do it for screens that have that bit flipped. So it should play as normal until I get to this screen and then the game is just going to reset. Let's check out to see if that works. Get to that second screen and game reset. Worked exactly like I told it to do. So now we've done something really cool. We have set up our own customization to what screen flags can mean. They don't necessarily mean hide sprites and hide HUD. Your game might have no reason to hide sprites ever. So you could use this flag for something else, and that's how you can do it. You could check a screen flag. So there might be some other things that reasons you might want to use this. Like you don't have to use this on the screen load. I'm going to erase this because this is not what I wanted to do, and I definitely don't want to have an instant reset in my game. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to come down into screen flags, and I'm going to make that not say instant reset. I'll just say screen flag 7. Okay. But let's say that I do want, if I do something on a certain screen and there's a screen bit flipped, it does a thing. I don't know. I'm just going to make something up. I just want you to understand the concept of how you can utilize this for customization. Let's look at one of my input scripts. Let's put move down. Okay. So now I'm just going to get to the end of, actually I'm going to go to the beginning here. So before anything happens, I'm going to load screen flag 00. Screen flag 00, flag 00. Okay. And I'm going to check the third bit, 001, 00000. Check third screen toggle. If it's not flipped, never mind. So as long as I put the plus here, it doesn't really matter what I put after it. That's a local variable, so it'll look for the next one of these labels. So if I have multiple skips, it won't say, oh, you have multiple labels that are named the same or whatever. As long as I have the plus sign, it'll look for the next one. Okay, so this is what happens is if third screen toggle is toggled, now I'm going to jump to reset. So this is happening if the move down gets enacted. So basically if I press the down key. It's only going to happen if this third screen toggle is flipped on. If it is when I press down, then it'll reset, which means on a screen where I want the down button to do something special, I could make a whole script for it and make a whole nother game state. But if this just isn't enough, if I need more things to happen and eight game states just isn't enough for whatever reason. Okay, so now I'm going to check the screen flags, and I'll call this. Let me go into screen flags. I'll call this 1, 2, 3 down resets game. All right. So now let me do this. Right now, nothing should happen. Nothing special happens. It just plays like normal. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my second screen here, and in my screen info, I'm going to toggle on my down resets game. So that'll only happen on that second screen. See, I'm pressing down, nothing bad is happening. Come here, now I'm gonna press down, and we reset. So you can see now I've changed an input script checking screen flags, right? So I don't really want that to happen. And there's literally a million other possibilities. There's infinite number of ways that you could utilize these screen bits in tandem to do, all kinds of things. And you could even flip them on and flip them off, on timers or things like that to have different effects that are timed. So that's some just an idea of how we can use screen flags. Very similarly, if you look at your monsters, you'll notice that your monsters have what are called action step flags. And honestly, this should say vulnerabilities because that's how they're referenced in code. They're your vulnerability bits. And they could do all kinds of things for you. So, for instance, you could make it so that you can't hurt a monster while a vulnerability bit is flipped. Or you can make it so you can only hit a monster with a projectile when a vulnerability is flipped. Or you can make it so when it's in a certain state, it ignores gravity or whatever. You can define all of these. So once again, you can come over here and you can name them in your monster action step flags. What's nice about monster action steps is they can be different from step to step to step. So maybe in this, it observes gravity, but then when it jumps to this next state, it ignores gravity, just kind of floats along, right? Or in this state, it's invincible, and in this state, it's not invincible. So you could do that. Now, by default, these don't do anything, and you need to do the same sort of tricks. What you can do, let's take a look at this real quick. Let's see if we can make something happen. You'll see I have object variables, and one of them is object vulnerability. Every time that an object's state jumps to the next step, it loads in that object vulnerability byte. So I'm going to make a object is harmless bit. So I'm going to go here, and I'm going to go to my project labels. I'm going to go to monster action step flags, and my flag 0. This one might be flipped. I might screw this up. I can't remember. One of these is flipped, and 0 is where 7 should be, and 7 is where 0 should be, which is right bitwise with a low endian byte, but wrong as far as the rest of the tool is concerned. So I'm going to name this monster is non-threatening, whatever. So now if I go into my object details and I look, you can see I've got, it abbreviates it obviously. I've got monster is non-threatening. So what I could do is I could have him move random, and he can go to the next step after the action timer's done. When he goes to the next step, now I could have him stop moving and make him non-threatening, and he'll also stop animating. And I'll just set the timer pretty high so I can test this pretty easy. And at the end of the action step, he's going to go to first. So now what's going to happen is he's going to start, and he'll hurt me right now if he's in this step. But when I advance to the next action, now he's going to, the monster will be non-threatening, which I'm going to make not hurt me. So in order to do this, I need to think, okay, well, where does my monster generally hurt me? It happens when the objects collide with each other. And I've got a script called, it's in common, handle player hurt. And I've got a special one that I made just for the troll base. So I'm going to edit this one. And I'm now going to look for vulnerability. So right here, this is where I can hurt the player. And what I'm going to need to do is I'm going to need, pull that back up. I'm going to need to find out, okay, so this is what I can hurt the player right here, this spot right here. I'm just going to enter down, and, I'm going to put also check for non-lethality. Lethality here. So I'm going to do that stuff here. And the only time I'm going to be able to do this is it lethal? Do this. So if it's not lethal, it's going to skip all past all this nonsense, right? So let's check for non-lethality. And what we have to do now is think, okay, where do we want this to come into play? Where do we want to check this bit? Well, when an object runs into another object, that's when we're doing all this checking. I need to know the value of the other object, the thing that I'm running into. I don't have a way to check it from this piece of code. I now know that X, the player is loaded into X. We know that, but how do I determine the other object? Let's check that out. If I look at my script settings, and I look at when my objects collide with each other, handle object collisions and subroutines, what I see is if all the conditions are met to do hurt player, then I'm storing the value of the other thing that I'm running into a variable called other object. Okay. So now I know that. Now I can use a couple of different methods to do this. There's no right or wrong way. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use X to talk about my player and Y to talk about the other thing. But just in case I need Y and it's going to be corrupted, I'm going to store Y somewhere. So I'm going to store, I'm going to put Y into the accumulator, and I'm going to push the accumulator, what's in the accumulator, to the stack. So that basically took whatever's in Y, whatever value's in the Y index right now, and it's going to put it over here. It's going to say, hold on to this for a second, and then I'm going to do stuff, and then I'm going to pull it back off. So I'm going to say TAY. So now this is pushing it back, pushing it to holding the Y value, and then doing some stuff, and then putting the Y value back in place. So it's like this stuff never happened as far as the Y value is concerned. Now I'm going to load Y in my do stuff part here with other objects. So now it's loading Y with the variable that I stored right here, right before I jump to this piece of code. It's loading Y with that, and I'm going to check load object vulnerability, comma Y. So I'm going to check the vulnerability bit of the other object. And what I'm going to say is If it's equal to 0, that means yes is lethal. So right here, I'll say yes is lethal. So I'll skip down here. And this is, nope, not lethal. So what I really have to do is I have to jump past all this stuff to skip hurt. But there's one other problem. Right now, if you notice, I pushed Y and I told it to hold it over here. And if it is if it's not lethal, I'm jumping to here. But I never restored this stuff. So I'm going to also have to restore that before I make this jump. TYA, or I'm sorry, PLA. TAY. So I'm pulling what's on the stack and I'm putting it back in Y. It's doing the same thing. It's either doing, it's pushing it and then doing this and skipping, or it's pushing it and it's jumping here and pulling it. So either way, I'm restoring Y, and you can see the last thing I do is I restore X. I push X and then I restore it. So now I know that coming out of this routine, my X and my Y are restored. So I'm going to save this. And this, all it's going to do is it doesn't do anything. It's just going to ignore the collision routine if that bit is flipped. So now if I come over here, I'm going to make sure in my monster, I've got in my action step, he's going to stop moving. And when he stops moving, and it's going to be a long timer, that's when he's non-threatening. So I'll just be able to walk right through him. Let's test this. Stopped, I can walk through him. Now he's not, and I die. So that's how I can set up a monster bit. Now, obviously, this isn't the only reason that I would use the. This isn't the only reason I could use these bits. I could use these bits for, damn near anything that I could think of that I need to change from step to step. But that's just an example of how I could go about setting up one of these bits to do something anomalous, in a certain case, on a certain step, for a certain object, whatever. So I hope this has been a good look at some of the advanced thinking that can go behind customizing your engine, how you can utilize screen bits, how you can utilize object or monster bits. You can do the same thing for game objects. I hope that starts to help and starts to put some things in your brain and start to see the code and relate it into the logic in your brain to the code that we end up seeing to what ends up on the screen in the end. I know that was a little bit thick, it was a little bit advanced, but this is the last day and I want to throw in some stuff that could really let you start customizing. So for those of you who stuck with the whole series, awesome. Some of you guys are probably going to be watching this in July, and it'll be Christmas in July. I hope this series has a little bit of longevity and that you guys really enjoyed it. The games I'm seeing you guys create are awesome. I'm going to continue to work on more tutorials for you, more advanced stuff, and more features for NESmaker, and more cool things to get more people involved in what we're doing. Thank you guys so much for being supportive. I really appreciate it, and I can't wait to see what you create in the coming year or years. If you have further questions, don't forget, you can jump on the forums at www.nesmakers.com, or that's great because you can put code in there, and there's a big user community, and you can search for topics. If you want quicker feedback, you can often get on the Facebook groups at facebook.com/groups/NESmakers, the NESmakers group. There is thousands of active users there that like to share screenshots and stories about what they're working on, and also helpful tips where you can look for things. And I think that's where we are most active. So again, thanks so much for checking out this video series. I hope everyone has a absolutely wonderful holiday, whatever you happen to be celebrating, and I hope this has brought a little bit more joy into your cold December. So take care, and I will see you the next tutorial series that we do.